In early 1774, there was no such thing as the United States. Along the Atlantic coast, 13 separate British colonies functioned as distinct legal entities, operating almost entirely independently of one another. That isolation eroded when Parliament punished Massachusetts for the Boston Tea Party. Britain enacted the Intolerable Acts, punitive laws that used the military to seize control of the colony and shutter the port of Boston. Virginia's Committee of Correspondence responded by inviting the other 12 colonies to Philadelphia. They proposed a meeting to coordinate a unified trade boycott to pressure Parliament. The military occupation of a major port convinced the other colonies that their safety now depended on a unified defense rather than individual diplomacy. On September 5, 1774, delegates arrived at Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. 12 colonies sent representatives, but Georgia remained absent. Facing conflicts with neighboring Native American nations, the colony could not risk jeopardizing British military protection. Peyton Randolph and Henry Middleton served as the first presiding officers, a role limited to moderating the floor. The title President of Congress carried no executive authority. They could not appoint committees or act without a majority vote. The primary achievement of this session was the Continental Association, seen in this printed document, establishing a continental-wide trade boycott against British goods. In the columns of signatures at the bottom, representatives committed their local merchants to the same economic restrictions. Before adjourning, the delegates scheduled a follow-up meeting next spring to monitor the boycott's effectiveness. At this stage, the Congress remained a temporary committee seeking a royal compromise. The delegates were still operating as British subjects, with no intent to separate from the crown. The expectation of a peaceful diplomatic follow-up was destroyed by the outbreak of open violence. On April 19, 1775, British regulars and local militias engaged in the first armed conflicts of the Revolution at Lexington and Concord. When the Second Continental Congress convened on May 10th, they relocated to the Pennsylvania State House. John Hancock took over as president, presiding over an assembly no longer just debating trade. They arrived to find a regional war already in progress. Outside Boston, Massachusetts militias were fighting the British Army without any central oversight or legal authorization. The delegates now faced a decision: leave Massachusetts to fight alone or assume responsibility. Massachusetts formally requested the Continental Congress take general direction of troops gathered in the field. On June 14, 1775, Congress officially adopted the militias, transforming them into the Continental Army. To lead this new force, the Congress unanimously appointed George Washington as commander-in-chief. In September, Georgia finally sent delegates, turning the assembly into a body representing all 13 colonies. By attempting to manage a crisis in New England, the Congress had constructed the core framework of a national government. 1 year of warfare and a failed military campaign in Canada ended any lingering hopes of a negotiated settlement with the king. The publication of Thomas Paine's Common Sense in early 1776 changed the political landscape. By attacking the concept of monarchy directly, the pamphlet moved the idea of self-rule into the public mainstream. This shift prompted colonies that had been hesitant to reconsider their positions. In June, New Jersey instructed its delegates to vote for separation. On June 7, 1776, Virginia's Richard Henry Lee formally introduced the resolution stating that the colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. Lee's resolution placed independence at the top of the official agenda. The question was no longer if the colonies would separate, but how they would justify it. Preparing for the vote, Congress appointed a committee of 5, including Adams, Franklin, and Jefferson, to draft a formal declaration. By June 23, 1776, the air in Philadelphia is thick with anticipation. John Hancock is presiding over a tense Congress, but the vote on independence has not yet occurred. Nearby, Thomas Jefferson is drafting this document, articulating the reasons for breaking with Britain. The extensive edits and margin notes in his handwriting show a debate in progress. Line by line, delegates were still contesting the exact language of separation. In 2 years, this assembly evolved from a temporary protest committee into a national government. On June 23, they stood at the precipice, preparing to invent a country.